Battle for your health.
Correct. So I am Dr. Brian. I am the owner of Liberty Wellness Group. I am a chiropractor by trade. So a lot of this is talking you through some things that we have been misinformed on your health, on your wellness, on things that you've heard a lot of times that happen to be incorrect. So the first one I want to talk about is aging. So I like to talk about the things that we have control over. I can't make you get younger. I can't stop the aging process. I wish that was the case. I would have a line out my door. However, we are misinformed in that as we age, we should do less. The exact opposite is true. As we age, we need to do more and more and more. But like a fine wine, like a good cigar, like a lot of other things, you have to take better care of yourself in order to do that. And how you do that is by taking more time to stretch, roll, warm up, and cool down. Let's talk about the cool down first and foremost. Most of us are in a hurry, right? We only have X amount of time a day that we can dedicate to ourselves. So we work out, we might even work out pretty hard, but then we forget about the cool down process. Cooling down should take at least 15 minutes, if not 30 minutes after your workout. Great cool down things. I love yoga for cooling down. I love some cool down plyometrics, or even just a 10-minute walk can make you drastically less sore. It doesn't have to be huge, but every little bit helps. And then as you take more time throughout the day to roll, to stretch, to ice, to make sure that your body is healing correctly, you're going to get more and more out of your workouts, and you're going to feel better and better instead of getting what's called DOMS, or delayed onset muscle soreness, which is our most favorite. So as you work out, you produce lactic acid. If you're working out even semi-hard, you produce lactic acid. The more lactic acid you have, the more likely you are to feel sore afterwards, and that's what's taking time to break apart. So 2 to 3 days later is when you actually feel that soreness. And as we age, unfortunately, it takes a little bit longer to get rid of that. So if we can mitigate it to stop on the front end, you will feel better on the back end. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about, is not only what the bad is, but how to get around the bad, because we don't want to be negative all day. So that's the goal. So the next thing I want to talk about is a little bit about arthritis. We've kind of been misinformed on arthritis our entire lives. There are only 4 inflammatory arthritides, which are psoriatic arthritis, enteric arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, and ankylosing spondylitis. Those are the only 4 inflammatory arthritides, and those are all genetic, unfortunately. So some of those can't be prevented, but they can be slowed down. And those are the ones that actually break apart bone as they're going through. That's why you get deformities with them. Rheumatoid arthritis, luckily or unluckily, really only affects your hands and your feet. Doesn't really affect any other part of your body. Occasionally affects C1, but that's exceptionally rare, which means if it's anywhere else, if it's your knees, your hips, your back, it's not rheumatoid arthritis, is the good news. The bad news is that it's osteoarthritis, which if you are over the age of 25, you have some. Guaranteed, just due to abuse over time. The good news is that arthritis does not cause pain. It's a big misconception. Arthritis just causes inflammation, which can lead to pain if it's not controlled. So how do you control the arthritis? Or how do you control the progression of arthritis? A couple different ways. Again, exercise is your best friend. Exercise is like WD-40 for your joints. Helps keep them mobile, especially if you're varying your exercise patterns. And I know I'm talking to the choir a little bit on this one, because you have people that design this for you. But as we get less mobile, as we sit around less, the worse arthritis gets, and the more arthritis hurts, because your joints aren't moving all the time. Other ways to help decrease osteoarthritis are to eat a low inflammation diet. So good examples of that are like the Mediterranean diet, paleo diet, keto diet to some extent, as long as a clean version of keto. And then there are several other low inflammation diets. The goal is to decrease sugar, increase protein, and keep fat at a healthy rate. That's kind of a clean diet in a nutshell, making sure you're eating actual food and avoiding synthetic food. I'm going to go into a deep dive into food later in the talk, because there's a lot of misconceptions and unfortunate things that have changed in the last even 10 years in food that are important to know. So the next thing I like to talk about is genetics. So this is part of what you can't control, but you can make better. So your genetics are what you're born with. It's your deck of cards. And the odds of you being a human at this point in existence are over 1 in a billion. The odds of another genetic sequence happening exactly like yours is over 1 in a trillion. So you are special. You are unique, even though we try to mitigate that to some extent and tell you that we all should fit into this box. So how you process food, how you exercise, how you burn calories are all 100% unique. but there are general rules of thumb that go along with that. So the more you exercise, and at least 45 minutes to 50 minutes a day is kind of the bare minimum to stay in the healthy range. And if we can do more, great. If we can't, that's kind of the number you should hit every day. People are like, well, I need a rest day. I love rest days, but I actually like active recovery days more. So instead of just sitting around doing nothing, which occasionally you do need that, your body needs that, your soul needs that, but that should be fairly rare. Instead, I want like physical therapy style exercises, plyometric style exercises, where I have this thing that keeps limiting me from doing all the other things I want to do. I should do specific exercises that aren't necessarily burning calories for that. So like rotator cuff, posture stabilizing exercises, SI joint injury exercises, core exercises. So that way I can do more when I'm back at the gym instead of just sitting around doing nothing. The next part of like the genetic talk is diabetes. So diabetes, everybody thinks is genetic. There's only a 3% correlation, not causation, between genetics and diabetes, type 2 diabetes specifically. Type 1 diabetes, completely genetic. We're not talking about that one. Type 2 diabetes, which is much more common, is the only completely preventable and completely reversible disease on the planet. All you have to do is eat less sugar. That's it. Sounds really simple. It's not really simple, but at the end of the day, if you eat clean, if you exercise, it is completely reversible, completely preventable. Genetics has nothing to do with it. As you have more weight, it is harder to lose weight because fat stores estrogen, and estrogen makes it harder to lose weight, which every female in this room knows. There's a 4-day time in your month where losing weight becomes almost impossible. But the good news is all the work you put in there actually pays dividends after and before even more. So you usually catch back up the week after your period. So it's getting frustrated during that time frame is easy to do, but it's one of the most important times to push yourself, because if you do, after the fact, you will be a healthier version of yourself. And that's kind of the goal. It's not always a weight number. For a long time, 70s, 80s, and into the early 90s, it was be the skinniest version of yourself. That wasn't a healthy version of yourself. It was just be skinny, be model skinny, be stick thin. Even for guys, like the attraction level was towards very skinny, very non-muscular males at that time period. Or then there was the extreme. There was the Arnold Schwarzeneggers, which everybody's like, oh, if I work out, if I lift weights, I get to be that. I can't tell you how hard it is to be that. How many calories a day most people would have to eat, and how often you'd have to work out in order to gain lean tissue mass like that. You're talking 12, 15, 16,000 calories a day and working out 4 to 5 hours a day. Most people actually that are working out actually don't eat enough calories. We don't stimulate the burn by giving ourselves enough food. And that's kind of where this talk is going next. So as you work out more, you actually have to eat a little bit more. And protein is the thing you need. If you're not getting enough protein, you will not heal correctly, and you will not be able to sustain your workouts long term. And you'll keep breaking down. You're like, I keep working out and then I keep getting hurt, keep getting hurt, keep getting hurt. And some of that could be mechanical, but a lot of that can be dietary. So if you get a little bit more protein in your diet, it doesn't have to be a ton. You don't have to go from eating what you should be eating is half your grams of protein a day in grams of protein. So whatever you weigh, let's say you weighed 100 pounds, 50 grams of protein a day is what they recommend. If you're working out, that should be another 25% on those days. And that's where most people fall behind, because even if they're hitting that 50 or 100 probably for most guys, and it should be 75 or 80 for most women, because most women don't weigh 100 pounds. Those are the numbers. And honestly, it should be a little bit more. So it's like 6 to 8 ounces per meal per day if you're eating 3 meals a day, and then a protein-rich snack. So nuts are one of my favorites, but there are other versions. Like if you're not a protein eater, my answers kind of change. Like animal protein, we have to eat a drastic amount more plant protein in order to get the same amount out of it as we do animal protein. We're highly efficient with animal protein. We are highly inefficient with plant-based protein. So the quinoas, the jicama, you have to eat 2 to 3 times the amount in order to get the same value at the end of the day, which is the hard part about being vegetarian, or especially vegan. At least in vegetarian, you can eat eggs, and we can kind of hodgepodge it together. But eating vegan and getting enough protein takes a drastic amount of work and usually requires a dietitian working with you very closely to make sure you're not missing things. I see a lot of people, oh, I went vegetarian, I'm automatically going to be healthy. And all they eat is pasta and sauce. Like, it's not going to work, unfortunately. And they're going to be so malnourished that not only are they going to not lose the weight they thought they're going to do, they're going to be less healthy versions of themselves because they're losing muscle mass at a drastic rate. There are 20 plus amino acids you have to get from your diet. The easiest way to get those amino acids is animal protein. You can get them from plant protein again. I'm not saying you can't be vegetarian. I'm not saying you can't be vegan. I'm just saying that the amount of work that is required in those things is a lot more. And the amount of research you have to do in order to get high quality sources of those things is a lot more. And the amount you have to cook for yourself is a lot more. And since most people I meet don't have time to barely eat healthy, I'm going to teach you the easiest ways to get there instead of the hardest ways to get there. So let's talk about food. So we all get very addicted to foods of different kinds. And it starts as we're very young. Unfortunately, one of the first things we're given as kids is that one of the first things you give to your kids are Cheerios, right? Like, everybody in here probably gave your kids a handful of Cheerios. What's in Cheerios? Sugar. What's the easiest thing that's blended up to get your kid to eat? Fruit, sugar. So, and we've been sold that healthy sugar is good sugar, but there's too much. And we start getting addicted to that much sooner because we're giving them sweeter and sweeter things, changing your palate over time to sweeter and sweeter things. That's why in the last 10 years, there are 60% more sugar in milk than there was 10 years ago. And before that, it was 50%. Before that, it was 20%. They just keep adding more and more sugar to get kids to drink it because they're trying to compete with soda. Like, well, if it's not sweet enough, they won't drink it. The milk you would get in Europe is drastically different than the milk you get here. And it's just amount of sugar. The same thing with ketchup. Not so much mustard. Mustard's still pretty good. It's just the seed. But almost ranch, you name a condiment, and it has drastically more sugar now than it did 10 years ago. And that's all by design. Because they also know that if it has more sugar, you eat more of it, and you eat it faster, and then it's gone sooner, so then you eat more and more and more of it. Sugar lights your brain up like a Christmas tree. It's more addictive than meth. It's the last socially acceptable drug. And it causes a myriad of health disorders. Like, the list is too long to go over in one sitting by far. So fad diets are kind of what I want to go into next. Again, I'm probably preaching to people that have already been told this, but it's important to talk about some good versions of that and some bad versions of that. So basically, anything where you're only eating one food source all the time is typically not great. So the carnivore diet is the extreme on the protein land of that. And there's only one situation where the carnivore diet seems to be helpful, and that is with severe inflammatory disorders. So like MS, ALS, things where your nervous system is shutting down due to any type of increased sugar. Maybe it can work in those situations, but it's very, very rare. Intermittent fasting is probably the next biggest fad right now. Most of us intermittent fast by default, which I'm a big fan of. You stop eating 2 hours before you go to bed, right? And then you don't eat again until breakfast. That's 8 to 10 hours. That's perfect. More than that requires a lot of work. Again, there are certain disorders that respond really well to intermittent fasting. But again, as a whole, as a normal society, unless there's a specific reason for you to do it, or you're like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing doing this, probably not for you. Typically breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack, either depending on how long you have to go in between those two, or maybe in between both, because you should never be hungry. If you are hungry, you're going to eat bad things. It just is. You'll get bored and you'll grab things because you're full. And a lot of times your hunger is actually dehydration. Start with water. You work your way up from there. Your snack can be water. But if you are doing things well, you'll have water by your side as often as possible. Because if it's in front of you, you'll drink it. If it's across the hall or not where you can see it, it's gone. Our brains are very compartmentalized. We're very good at boxes. We're very good at hyper-focusing on all these things, so then you don't get where you want to be. Water-wise, so anybody in here know what the recommended amount of water is to drink in a day? You can say it out loud because it's been this way for a while. 64 has been what we told. And guess what? That was the lowest bar they thought the American people could accept. So that's what they went with. So 80 ounces is the bare minimum. And if you are working out, closer to a gallon should be your goal. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to the bathroom all day, every day. And for the first 2 weeks, you are 100% right. And then after that 2 weeks, it will get better and better and better because your body will process that water better. Your body won't be working as hard to pull water out of everything else. And coffee-wise, make sure we're like 1 cup a day is recommended and great for your body. Anything more than that, like I'll even give you 10 to 12 ounces a day, and you're dehydrating yourself and you're going to actually make yourself more tired over time. You're also going to decrease your REM sleep on average, which means you're not sleeping as well. You might be sleeping as much or even more, but your quality of sleep drastically decreases after that. Things that have synthetic caffeine are much worse rather than naturally occurring caffeine. So Monsters, Red Bulls, 5-hour energies, all that stuff gets you a bigger spike, but it's not as natural. And unfortunately, you crash off of those things much harder, meaning that you need more of it sooner. Using like B vitamins instead, getting them from either a natural source or from a multivitamin will get you a lot slower release throughout the day, give you more energy so that way you can do more things on a consistent basis. And they're not as inflammatory, so they don't cause all the negative effects of those spikes. So let's talk about lack of real food in the American diet as a whole, which again, I might be talking to the wrong group, but luckily I'm recording this for all of the internet. So I'm sure there's some people I'm hitting. And honestly, nobody eats perfectly all the time. I can't like tell you that I eat perfectly all the time. That's not really a thing. I don't like putting things on shelves that you can never have again. That's not a healthy way to look at food. A healthy way to look at food is to realize that I can eat clean the vast majority of the time, and then I can choose when I have something else. And I have to take ownership of that choice. I'm choosing to eat it, A, and then I'm not going to beat myself up about it, B. It's fine. I did that choice, now I'm going to go back to eating clean again. If I don't do those two things, what happens is it snowballs. You feel bad about eating what you ate, whatever it is, whatever your vice of choice is. Like, I love double cheeseburgers with some bacon. Like that is a great cheat meal that I'll have once in a while, or pizza once in, every couple months, even though like lactose is my favorite thing, right? But then the next 2 weeks, I can go back to eating clean because I gave myself that little bit of reprieve so that way I can, I don't feel like I'm missing stuff on a regular basis. It makes it easier to eat clean more often. The key though, is I don't get to cheat every day. If you do a little cheat every day, you're spiking your insulin that much more every day. And unfortunately, over time, every time you hit that insulin marker, the amount of insulin your body wants goes up. And then once your insulin gets high enough, your body starts producing insulin in the absence of sugar to try to keep up. It's like your motor running all the time just to keep up with the amount of gas you're consuming because you're always eating it. So it's always there. So it's trying to get rid of it at a faster and faster rate, trying to shuttle it into the cells at a faster and faster rate. And as you produce more insulin, it also makes you more hungry. It increases your sweet tooth because as your insulin is higher, then you want more food. It's one of the few self-regulating mechanisms in our body, which means it's very easy to break. Most other mechanisms in the body have multiple checkpoints where it would tell it to slow down. This one doesn't. It's its own loop. So as the loop gets faster, the loops get faster, the loops get faster until you have to break it. It's like most other addictions where the easiest, fastest, simplest way is to go cold turkey. But most people won't do that. So you can slowly choose 1 or 5 things. I think you guys do 3, right, Nate? 3 things at a time for habit?
Yeah, right now though we changed it.
Okay. It used to be 3. Yeah, 3 to 5 things is a very manageable thing to change each month. And then after you've done them for 90 days, they become a habit. So whether you want to pick water, you want to pick a little less sugar, and sugar's in everything. There's no such thing as a 0 sugar diet. I don't care if all you're eating is protein and vegetables, you're still getting enough sugar in your diet, 100%. Because there's sugar in protein, there's sugar in vegetables, there's sugar everywhere. So you'll get plenty of it. We only need 46 grams a day of sugar to make your brain happy. Everything else is bonus. Everything else gets turned into fat at the end of the day. Unfortunately, that's what happens to it. And people are like, well, what about protein? Doesn't protein get turn into fat? No, actually it doesn't, because it gets turned into those amino acids, which either we use them or we excrete them. That's it. That's the only things that happen with them, is either we use it or it goes out of our body, which is nice. Fat, for a long time, people talked about fat being bad, fat bad, because they wanted to sell more sugar. That's where the old food pyramid came from, honestly. When the American diet consumed more fat on average, when you had bacon and eggs for breakfast, and you had a big cut of meat for lunch, and you had a big cut of meat for supper, with even potatoes, which isn't my favorite, but that's what they were eating on a regular basis, we were drastically thinner as a whole. As soon as we changed it to a carb-based system, we started going up exponentially in the amount of weight. And that's all because of that misinformation. We were taught for a long time. And even the idea of healthy carbs and whole grains being better. Are whole grains better than simple grains? Yes, but, and it's a big but, at the end of the day, it's just sugar. It takes you longer to get to that sugar, yes, but it's still just sugar. There's hardly any other nutritional content in that. People are like, well, what about fiber? Don't I need more fiber as I age? And the answer is yes, but how you get it can drastically vary. Do you want to get it from carbs in the form of bread or any of those things, or do you want to get it from vegetables? And if I get it from vegetables, my return on investment is very high. If I get it from pretzels or popcorn or bread, my investment is very low. How I look at food a lot is an ROI, return on investment. Like, what is the nutritional content versus what is the caloric content? And if the nutritional content can justify the caloric content, it's a great food choice. If those things are inversed, it's a terrible food choice. And if you're always kind of doing that math, you'll end up in pretty good shape. How to look at sugars from good versus bad is glycemic index. So that's how it hits your body, how much of that turns on the insulin-based process. So great choices are blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, because the nutritional content of fruit is all on the skin. So a lot of skin, very little on the inside. Everything on the inside is just fructose. And fructose, if we all remember from our science class, is only 2 sugars put together. So it's 1 sugar away from being the simplest sugar possible, which is glucose. So it's very easy to break apart. It's very easy to absorb. So the bigger the fruit is, the worse the glycemic index is. It's kind of a good mental math. So watermelon is the worst offender. And then everything is, that's why it's so sweet. It's why it tastes so good. It tastes just like water. It's water and sugar. Is all watermelon is, unfortunately. So that's, but as you get smaller, you get more out of what you're eating. And that's both how you save yourself a lot of hassle in the long run, and it's also how you kind of start cleaning out your diet. Because in blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries are kind of the next level up. They're kind of on the next, it's getting closer to glycemic index versus nutritional content. And then apples are kind of the max. If it's bigger than an apple, it's probably not worth it. And if you're not eating the skin of an apple, forget about it. Because again, all the nutritional content is on the skin. That's what makes the thing grow. Everything else is just sugar. So remembering how fruit propagated for a long time is all that stuff on the outside was to get a bird or animal to move it somewhere else. And then everything on the inside is to help that seed grow. And that's how, every tree, every bush before we existed came to fruition, is that mechanism there. And then it grows from there. We talked about that. So let's talk about calories in versus calories out. This is another common misperception. So it'd be very nice if our body worked on a 0 and 1 system, where if I eat 100 calories and I burn 100 calories, I'm net 0. That would be great. A, the type of calories make a drastic difference on if you're able to burn them off. And B, we are highly efficient creatures. We were designed for millennia to run at a very slow pace and make every other mammal tired and fatigue out and die. That's how we hunted. We are not faster or stronger than any other mammal on the earth. So in order to get protein, we had to very slowly run at them until they killed over, because they can't get rid of heat. We are highly efficient at getting rid of heat. That's our only advantage, and intelligence help later on. But especially before our version of humans, it was mostly just running at a very slow pace to kill them. So the theory, the active theory now, is that we would hunt in a giant pack. Everybody would run at a very slow pace. That's why at ultramarathon distance, women win 50% of the time. Men win 50% of the time. It's a coin flip on who wins ultra marathons, because at that type of pace, we run about equally. Sprinting obviously is very different. Like a freshman male sprinter would win the female Olympics right now, just from a time standpoint. So once you need to go quickly, then the men would take over. But once you need the whole pack to clean that animal, take care of that animal, make sure that you got every part of that animal out, then you need the whole thing moving as one. There's still a tribe in South America that runs close to 80 miles a day, 40 miles one direction, 40 miles back to get water and food. They run through this cave and they just run as one. And then they run back as one every single day. Their feet structure, their bone structure, and their average age is insane, considering they have no modern medicine, no amenities whatsoever, but they're living into their 70s and 80s, which, if you think about it, we were told forever that we only lived until we were 40, 50. We only lived until we were 40, 50 because we didn't exercise, we didn't eat well, and we had very little access to clean water. And those three things make a huge difference in how long you live as a whole. So let's talk about like air quality a little bit, right? So air quality comes in a couple different forms, and this are things that you can control and things you can't control. So VOCs are in the air all the time. Every time you put paint down, every time you use a nonstick pan, every time you turn on your microwave, some volatile chemicals are released. Unfortunately, these cause damage to our cells over time, and it's just sheer amount. So the amount that we can decrease those things, use things like cast iron, use low burning oils, use low VOC paints, it drastically improves your quality. And then how to best mitigate in your own house is to use a high quality air purification system. So the little filter in your house is mostly to protect your HVAC unit. It's not to protect you or your lungs. It's a misperception. It's designed to keep stuff out of your furnace, not designed to keep stuff out of you. So like in our house, we have this, it's actually a fairly small unit, but it's a reverse ion filter with a black light filter inside of it. So it has 3 different types of filters inside of it, and that catches all the stuff. And then it also has a black light filter for like all the virus stuff, which works really well. And then it recirculates. So your air almost smells ionized if you are not used to it, but it gets rid of a lot of pollution, a lot of inflammation to your lungs on a regular basis, because we can't control the rest of the world. Cars are going to be turned on, motorcycles are going to be run, everything runs off of carbon currently. We might change that, but you still have to charge those electric things somehow currently, and it's not solar and it's not wind yet. So if it's not those 2 things, it's going into the air. So that's kind of the how to take better care of your own lungs, and then obviously avoid irritants. So again, probably talking to the wrong crowd, but things like vaping are, while it doesn't create the old, like there's not a billion things in it like there used to be in cigarettes, but it's still not good for your lungs. It's still a water vapor that has chemicals in it. So over time, it causes a different and new irritant that we just don't know enough about, but eventually it's going to lead to a new type of cancer. It just will. It took close to 100 years for science to prove that cigarettes cause cancer. And in fact, they never proved it. It's still correlation, not causation, because it's almost impossible to prove something caused something else in the science world. It's very, very hard, because you could smoke your entire life and not get cancer, or you could never smoke a day in your life and get cancer. And that's why you can't say this causes that. You're like, what do you mean? I know it causes it. Yes, but you could quit smoking. As soon as you quit smoking, 6 months afterwards, your cells go back to normal. It's kind of crazy. So our cells become cuboid or smaller and square as they're getting irritated by things like cigarette smoke or chewing tobacco or even alcohol to some extent if you're drinking a lot of it. Anything that irritates the same tissue over and over and over again makes the cells change from very long and very skinny to very narrow and very square from that irritation. And as soon as you stop, they change back. Which is kind of cool. Our bodies are amazing at adapting to stress. Our bodies are amazing at healing and going back to normal if you give them a chance. So let's talk about ergonomics next. So this is the next way that the world is most definitely not in your favor. We start as a C, we will end as a C if we're not careful. Let that sink in for a second. So in utero, you start as a C. So these are our defined curves. And these are the curves that you'll end up with over time if you're not careful. right? So go to any senior living center, and that's how you'll see 95% of the people walking moving. And most of that was preventable over time. We just have to work drastically harder. And the more advanced age you're at, the harder you have to work at it. Things like cell phones and computers, and even your car seat is very designed to push you forward. So let's talk about the car first. What do you mean? Like, our cars are so smart now. They're doing all these great things for us. Yes, but. So if you remember cars from the 1950s, 1960s, they had a straight back seat and a straight forward seat. There was no curve, right? Unfortunately, those were not very safe when it came to an accident because they did not protect you in any way, shape, or form. So what they figured out is, well, if we build this cocoon, this person does drastically better. So they built a cocoon for you. And unfortunately, that pushes you forward and in towards your steering wheel all the time, making it harder and harder and harder for you to be upright. So either you lean way back or you lean way forward. There's no in between in a modern seat. So how to best prevent that? Lumbar supports are great. Some cars have them built back in now. Otherwise, a good version of that is what's called a McKinsey lumbar support. Those are designed by a chiropractor. You can find an off-brand of it that's drastically cheaper, but those work really great to help put you in a better starting position. And then instead of 10 and 2, which automatically my shoulders end up by my ears, you actually go opposite. This is modern driving school. This is how they teach like FBI agents, Secret Service agents to drive. It's down here, not up here, because they're in the car too much. And if you're in an accident ever, my thumbs aren't on the steering wheel. So when I get hit, my hands drop and my seatbelt catches me. Instead of here, my hand, so my wrist gets affected, my elbow gets affected, my shoulder gets affected. Everything gets stopped. And typically it's only one hand, so it's even worse because then I only go towards the opposite side, is if we're being honest about how we all drive. So down lower is a much safer place to be. If you're in heavy traffic and you feel more confident up here, great. But like if you're just cruising around most of the suburbs, or if you're just on the highway and there's not a lot of people around, if you drop your hands down, you can just see how my chest opens up immediately versus here. There's no chance I can do this for any length of time. There's a lot of chance I can do this for length of time. Most of my arms are shut off. So then at home, so again, our couches are designed to be sat in, not laid in. I was going to let that one sink in for just a second. So the first thing that people do is they lay across their couch. So in your couch, there are these little divots for where you're supposed to be sitting. And unfortunately, your body doesn't contour like that when you're sitting on your side or when you're laying face up. Falling asleep on the couch is one of the worst things you can do for your back, for your spine, for your neck, because your head ends up like this. It's terrible. And I can't tell you how many patients I work with on a regular basis. They literally can't lift their head anymore. It's stuck forward. It's never going to come back. It is now locked there because of degeneration. They started sleeping in a chair, usually because of like either like sleep apnea issue or like a post-surgery issue. Like you get shoulder surgery, you physically can't lay down. You have to stay upright for 6 weeks, and all of a sudden it's hard for you to get used to sleeping down. So there can be things outside of your control, but laying flat, laying on your back are the best positions for you as a whole. Like basically, this is the best position. Anytime you're curled into yourself, you are going to slowly cause issues over time. I get asked a lot about beds, and I wish that there was real science on beds. I really do. I did a deep dive into beds a couple years ago. There's no real science. As a whole, firmer beds work better. Non-spring beds work better. Basically, flat, hard surfaces are kind of what most people will do the best on. But again, it's an average, and things to avoid that definitely don't work well are pillow top mattresses because they're too soft. If you weigh over 100 pounds, pillow top mattresses will sink faster than anything else. Water beds are a terrible idea. There's no support anywhere. Unfortunately, they can feel great for a couple of minutes, but your body does. Again, you would curl into yourself throughout the night. Unfortunately, instead of staying in a good ergonomic-ish position, it's one of the few times you can't control it. And changing a sleep cycle takes over a year to do. So each time you wake up, you just have to go back to a different position. And over time, statistically, you will spend more time in that position, but it's one of the hardest things to control, which is why I only kind of briefly touch on it as a goal, but it's not an easy easy fix by any means of the word. Next thing I want to talk about is our dopamine addiction. Anybody in here know what dopamine does? Okay, so it's our happy hormone. It's what gets triggered every time that we are happy, excited, want to do something. It's that, that's the hormone. That's what it does. And what triggers it the most in modern society is social media. So social media is designed very much like a slot machine. It's colors, it's lights, it's a flickering, all designed off slot machines because they know how addictive slot machines are. That's why all of a sudden you can pick up your phone and it can be an hour later if you're not careful. It just zones you out completely. And that's all done by science. They sit there and they tweak it by micromillimeters every day. And you're talking millions and millions of people. So they can pick a test bunch based off of age, gender, socioeconomic backgrounds, and they can tweak it to see if they can make you stay on there a minute or two longer on average. And they just do that all day, every day, times a trillion. That's the type of math they're doing. People are like, well, it's on me. The ownership's on me. And the easiest thing is to set your phone aside and to detox from it. But let's be honest in how hard that is, because your calendar's on there, your email's on there. By design, your entire life is on that little device, and that makes it drastically harder. So, best ways to help yourself are to set kid timers for yourself. You can set timers for your kids, right? Most of you probably have. Has anybody in here set a timer for yourself?
There's a social media app you can use to
Let's stay off of other apps, but yeah. Yeah, so then, and you can't get on until you've earned points. And you can set your own way to earn points. It could be walk around the office. It could be cleaning the dishes. It can be whatever you want that's a productive change instead of a negative change. Drink 4 ounces of water. There's a lot of different ways I could build something healthy into that instead of having it all be a negative. Because it's very hard to say everybody in here could get off of it completely is, I run a business. I have to be on it, in order to run a business. There's no way around it. But I don't need to sit there and scroll through my friend's stuff either. I need to check my business stuff and then get off of it is the goal. Not always where it ends up, but if you set a high-reaching goal, at least you'll get closer more often. If you reach for the stars, maybe you'll land on the moon. Versus, well, it's inevitable. I'm just going to be on here, and then you're on TikTok for 5 hours, and you got nothing done. Right? And that's the frustrating part about social media. And it's triggering a core part of your brain that tells you that you're happier. Even though as a whole, because you're producing so much dopamine, you actually become less sensitive to the dopamine. And so it makes you actually more depressed over time. And it affects your sleep, affects all kinds of other things that are all negatives instead of positives. Computers do the same thing. In blue light filters should be on every computer you own, should be on your cell phone, because it really affects your eyes long term. It's been shown to drastically increase the rate that our eyes decrease functioning over time. So turning those filters on drastically help your eyes, drastically help your brain function on a normal everyday basis. People are like, well, what about the glasses? The problem with the glasses is that they don't cut, it's not like it's a ski mask, right? It comes around in all these other reflection points. We don't live in a vacuum, and our eyes do better with it being out here filtered, so that way the rest of the world isn't filtered. You want all those other spectrums of light in your life from a natural form, just not from the computer. I touched a little bit on the addiction to that, but you can see how easy it is to become addicted to social media because of that. And we don't associate it with gambling because it does not technically cost you money in that second. Right? You're not gambling away hundreds of dollars. But if if you actually did the math on how many hours you were spending on social media, imagine if you could get $5 of that back an hour. Well less than minimum wage. You're probably talking at least $30,000 plus a year in lost productivity, if not drastically more. I'm really undershooting it, both at the $5 per hour. I'm way underpaying you guys, and by the other negatives that come from it. Because social media put does two things. They put up all these glossy photos that are unrealistic versions of other people's lives. Nobody's life is perfect. It just doesn't happen. And then also, 1 out of every 6 or 7, depending on how they figured out how to get you on social media more, are something that makes you angry. Angry. Something you adamantly disagree with. Whatever it is. If you're semi-right spectrum, it'll be something from the left. If you're semi-left spectrum, it'll be something from the right. If you're semi-religious, it'll be something semi-atheist or vice versa. They figure out what your trigger is to keep you in that situation longer. Because if you are angry, you spend 34% more time on social media than if you're happy. So there's this whole, there's a couple of different research things that have been done on this. So they thought all drugs are bad because they put these mice in this glass tube and they gave them meth. And every single one of them OD'd on meth. They did the same thing with this little rat, like Disneyland, that basically all these tunnels and things they could do and other rats to play with, and almost none of them touched it. If they touched it, they would touch it once and then like go play again for hours and days. So if you have other things to do, you don't get as addicted to those types of things. And it works for social media, it works for sugar. It's addiction in our brains are similar across the board. It's just varying degrees of how it affects your body. Obviously, there's a big difference between being addicted to hard drugs and being addicted to social media. But at the end of the day, your total life process goes down. Your happiness goes down. And that's not what we want to build. Bigger, better versions of ourselves at the end of the day is part of the goal. So let's talk about alcohol next. So this one is an interesting talk because nobody wants to hear that it's now been shown that we should not drink every day. I don't care, not drink a glass of wine every day. How many people in here heard that I should drink a glass of wine every day, like red wine? Almost every single person in there. So again, they lowered the bar. What they figured out, well, if we tell them that they can drink 3 ounces a day, they won't drink 5 glasses a day. But the actual inverse happened. People, I can have a glass a day. So they have 8 ounces a day. And then 8 ounces turns into 10, turns into a bottle. It just slowly over time, in order to get that same level of dulling your anxiety, depression, stress, you do more and more and more over time. It's just what happens with depressant. You need more of it in order to get to the same level of depression. And that decreases sleep, it decreases energy, and it makes everything else in your body work harder because it, at the end of the day, is a toxin. So it's not so much like never drinking. That's kind of an unrealistic expectation in modern adult society. It's maybe it should only be 1 or 2, once a week or once every other week is better. And if you can reduce it even more, you're going to feel better. If you can go 30 days without alcohol, the amount of changes that happen in your body are drastic. If you can go 60 days without alcohol, the changes are profound. So they can be goals, and it can just be resets too, because your tolerance to the alcohol will go back down, is the nice part about it. So you won't need 2 glasses anymore. You'll need half or 1 to get to the same level. So you're just resetting the cycle. It will save you money and it will help your body work better, is the nice part about it. So stress is one of the last things I kind of want to talk about today. So stress is one of those things that there's a lot of research that stress decreases age and makes us age quicker and is bad for us. But stress is perception. So if you believe stress is good for you, honestly, stress becomes good for you. If you believe stress is bad for you, stress becomes bad for you. And they've done a ton of research on this, that your perception of stress matters more than the amount of stress you're getting. So if you can think about stress in a healthier way, like I'm getting through this process and it's okay, I'll be okay, we'll be okay, you will do better. Versus, oh my gosh, this stress is going to kill me. It amplifies itself. It becomes a self-regulating mechanism where hypercortisol syndrome is what I'm talking about. So at some point, you don't know the difference between that lion chasing you and that email, if you let it. So setting good boundaries, Tai Chi, yoga, deep breathing, meditation, all are great ways to help mitigate your stress and help you become more mindful of your feelings and then process those feelings in a healthier, deeper way. So these are the things I kind of wanted to get through like semi-quickly, but I wanted to open up for questions too. So what questions do you guys have?
Can you go back to talked about how many ounces of protein per pound?
So it's half of your body weight in grams of protein per day is the bare minimum. On days you work out, I would recommend 25% more of that. And honestly, about 10 to 15% more of that on a regular basis is a good idea because you'll heal better. As long as you're working out 3 to 5 times a week, that's the answer. If you're only working out once a week, my answer changes to less because I need to reduce your calories at that point, unfortunately. Good question.
And on the indoor air quality, if you have any questions, I can handle that. I can help you guys with that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
I designed the whole systems.
Yeah. Air quality. Oh, you have you. Okay, but what I said is an accurate depiction of how it works. Like, I'm not an HVAC professional. I'm not going to install something in your house, but I would highly recommend getting done.
Worse now with the Department of Energy and building codes, it's even making the house more sick. We have clients that put in foam walls, foam ceilings, foam attics, and now that foam is breaking down, and that's off-gassing. And that's affecting the VOCs in the home. So the paint industry, cut the VOCs down, but the building industry and Department of Energy is increasing. Your triple pane windows, your ceiling of the house. So you got to actually bring more air in the house and then clean it while you bring it in.
Yep. Which is bigger machines that are supposed to be more efficient, but then they're require more energy. It's a vicious cycle of trying to fix one thing and then creating new problems, which happens in the food industry too. We're trying to feed more people, and because we're trying to feed more people, we get less quality food. Like the amount of hamburger that has to be in a hamburger is 35%. Exactly. So everything else can be seasoning and ingredients, and anything that's part of the manufacturing process, how they made it, does not have to be listed. So like pink slime is how McDonald's hamburgers are made. So they strip protein off of the bone using ammonia, and then that creates what looks like a slime, and then they make that into a burger. Is what was in your kids' school food for a long time too. They've kind of pushed back on that a little bit, but it was a cost-saving mechanism. It was very cheap. Once upon a time, like chicken wings and chicken legs weren't valuable until somebody figured out that they could make money off them. Those were discarded for a very long time. They're like, oh, I can make something delicious out of this, buffalo chicken wings. And then now they're worth a lot more. And that happens over time with foods. Like, oh, I can make something better out of it, then it becomes more expensive. But I appreciate you all coming. If you have any other questions, food-related, health-related, I promise all future seminars will do more active things. I do prefer seminars that are more active, but sometimes it's good to get this information out so we can have better conversation.